My name is Saviksha.
My name is Poppy.
It's me, your favorite queen, Francesca Dynamite.
We are Louder Club, and you're watching Queer in Alberta.
Welcome to Queer in Alberta. I'm your host, Kels Valenzuela Delamarter. I'm a queer Filipina Canadian, and I use she, her pronouns. I sit down and chat with 2S LGBTQIA plus Albertans who tell me about their experiences of coming out, growing up in small towns, and finding community in the province of Alberta today. Queer in Alberta is filmed on Treaty 7 territory in the city of Lethbridge, Alberta, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Otipimsuwak Métis government in the Alberta District Number 1. And we already have guest star unexpected. Oh my goodness, come on, honey. Okay, if you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you will recognize my partner Sarah's cat, Hazel, who truthfully is the biggest diva of us all. As soon as the cameras come on, she's immediately in the little home studio. So, honey, say hi. What do you have to say about being queer in the prairies? I feel that. Okay, moving on. It is our final episode of season 2 that was filmed in fall 2023 and made possible, of course, with the support of Tell a Story Hive. I have had so much fun over these last few months releasing these episodes in advance, and they're actually making their national TV debut on, I think, September 24th. So if you are a TELUS Optic TV subscriber, or maybe your aunt who doesn't podcast has been wanting to watch the show and she is a Optic TV subscriber, you can tell her that to go check out the season. You can look at it on September 24th. If you enjoyed season 2 and you're not already following or subscribed to the show wherever you are watching or listening, Hazel and I would humbly ask, and I'm going to put up the kitty eyes here for those of you that are watching. Look at that face. No, Hazel, you gotta work it for the camera here. We're trying to... What a diva. Oh my God. But essentially, if you are not already following or subscribed to the podcast, wherever you are watching or listening, I would really humbly ask that you consider doing that. It is one way that you could support more episodes of Queer in Alberta coming in the near future. So yeah, if you have been following along and you want to get the fastest updates on new episodes or anything to do with the show, definitely just hit that button and I would appreciate it so very much. So, as many of you may remember from listening along, we are already in the thick of production for season 3, but that's not going to come out till spring 2025, and we don't have an official date quite yet because it's still a ways off. I don't know about you, but I didn't really want to wait that long for more episodes of Queer in Alberta. Maybe that was just me. I hope not, because I have some incredibly exciting news that I have been waiting to share with you until things were 100% and official. But I am so ecstatic to share that season 2, this is not the end, my friends. We are getting 4 more episodes. Queer in Alberta has been sponsored by Stringham LLP. And with their help, we are going to be able to film 4 more episodes to bring you more Queer in Alberta content before spring 2025 and that season 3 release. And do you know what the most exciting part is? These episodes get to be filmed in person. That's right, besties. Literally, we are going on a mini gay-ass tour across the province. I'm still deciding what towns and cities that I'm going to go visit. So this is your moment that if you really feel like you have a story or your community has something that we need to talk about, literally DM me or email me at queerinalberta@gmail.com. That would be even better. And I will see if it is one of the cities and places that I am able to go to with this funding. I can't believe this is happening I say it all the time, for something that started on Zoom to now be I am packing up my mom car and driving across the province, U-hauling my studio to chat with you in person. I'm in disbelief. The other thing, there's an additional caveat to this news, and it is that if we get 500 streams on each of those 4 episodes made with the support of Stringham LLP, we are going to be greenlit for a 5th episode with them. Go and share the podcast with your friends. Tell your ally mom to bring it back to her Super Slay book club so that they all listen to it. Subscribe and tell everybody you know so that we can keep capturing and sharing 2S LGBTQIA plus stories from across Alberta. Now, if you want to take it a step further and you want to help a little bit more, you can actually support us filming by going to buymeacoffee.com/queerinalberta. All of the proceeds will go directly to myself, to my team, and again, to our U-Haul studio. If you want to stay updated on all of our travels as we hit the road, you can definitely go follow kels.valendela, KELS.VALENDELA on Instagram and TikTok. That's where we'll be posting that content live. So happy news all around. If you are not watching the video, I will describe that me and Hazel are cheesing it up over here on the other side of the screen. I'm so excited to see what comes next, but let's get into today's episode, the final episode of this first stretch of season 2. I think we'll call this string of episodes like season 2 extended or something. I met our guest for the first time working as a moderator for a panel that featured them and 2 other individuals with NYX Cosmetics. What immediately stood out to me about our guest was the way that they used humor to reach people and to educate, as well as how they use language so vividly and really paint pictures and tell stories in the way that they talk. I also could really tell that culture and community and heritage were so important to their personhood and to their life. And I was really, really honored and excited when they decided to come on to the show. For those of you that have been on social media in the last few years, and especially if you are familiar with the amazing and funny content that they make on native TikTok, you may already know our guest, the one and only Kairyn Potts. But Kai Potts is a proud Two-Spirit person and Indigenous content creator. As a former board member for Two Spirits in Motion and Youth Suicide Prevention Team representative, he is a passionate advocate who works to improve Indigenous youth's lives, particularly queer youth and youth in the child and family services system. He was named to TikTok's Global Discover list in 2022 as one of the platform's top 50 changemakers. Kai, I am so honored that you decided to come onto my little podcast. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, and for your friendship. It made me so happy to get to know you and to hear a bit more of your story and for you to share more of your knowledge with me. And I just know that my audience is really going to learn so much from this conversation that we had together. Here is the final episode of Season 2, Mapping Place, Winkte, and Indigiqueer perspectives on what is Alberta today.
Learning about this term Winkte or Winkte, it really kind of loosely translates to somebody that moves through the world kind of like a woman would move through the world. And English obviously butchers the translation and doesn't really encapsulate that spirit of that word. In many of our Sioux cultures, Winkte people were quite revered. Hi, Abawashte Tanse. I'm so excited to be here.
I told my girlfriend that I was interviewing you today, and the first thing she said to me was like, Kelsey, you better do like your eye makeup or something. Like,
you know, I was gonna get all dolled up and do the whole thing, and then I remembered we're talking about Alberta. Today we're being Burtons. And so
it's true.
I was like, I'm gonna wear plaid.
I'm gonna wear.
Yeah. What an incredible podcast topic. I feel like there's not much representation for Albertans who are queer. Because to me, I don't know why, queer and Alberta don't really mesh very well together in my experience. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for saying that, because that's totally why this series kind of started. Definitely feeling those themes of isolation on the Canadian prairies, so I'm glad that it resonated, and we're so lucky to have you on the show today. Would you mind maybe sharing your pronouns with my audience?
Sure. So I go by he, him, they, them pronouns, and I identify as Two-Spirit Indigiqueer.
And you know, I wanted to just tell you, Kai, when I first met you a few months ago, we worked an event together, and when you introduced yourself as Two-Spirit and said your pronouns were he, him, it was actually kind of a learning moment for me. I realized I'd kind of internalized this idea that Two-Spirit folks maybe used he, they, or they, them pronouns, because everybody that I know and that I'm friends with, they all kind of do that. And it was just like this nice, gentle reminder of, hey, this identity has so many different ways that it can look.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Two-Spirit is such a complex term and has such an umbrella term, I think, and so many people who fall under that umbrella of Two-Spirit identify in so many different ways. And so I always let people know, like, Two-Spirit to me is always going to look different than Two-Spirit to another person, depending on where they're from, which nation they're from, or which teachings they have, or kind of just how they live their life. So Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it reminds me of another conversation I had with a two-spirit individual on the show, Ryan Crosschild, even talking about how that term, like, it's an English term, it doesn't necessarily share the beautiful intricacies and cultural specificities of it to different peoples. So yeah, I think the conversation we're going to have today is going to be such a great space of learning and fun, and I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with me and for your laughter.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I can't wait.
Yeah, so let's kind of get into it. Where are you calling in from today? Are you in Edmonton right now?
I am in Edmonton, actually. Yeah, I was born and raised in Amiskwaciwâskahikan, or Edmonton. I'm originally from Treaty 6. I'm from the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation and also from Paul First Nation, which are about an hour out from Edmonton, on the kind of west side of central Alberta. So I grew up in this area pretty much my entire life, and then I've been living in Toronto for the last 4 years, but I'm back home for 4 months during this time, just because of some family situations and some obligations that I have over here.
How does it feel? I'm just immediately curious. Like, how does it feel to be back on your homelands, back home after being in the big city?
I realized quickly that not much changes. I've been in Toronto for 4 years, and when I came home back to Edmonton, I remember being here and thinking like, wow, it's like I left yesterday. Nothing has
Yeah.
really changed that much, especially in Edmonton. There's a lot of construction happening in Edmonton all over the entire city. And so I think Edmonton is going to be a really great place to live in like 7 years probably, once everything is finished and there's so much more new developments. But it's the same vibe. It's the same, like, I had a really like bad experience growing up in Alberta, and especially in Edmonton. And so leaving to a big city like Toronto has really just, for me, exemplified how much art and culture is lacking in Edmonton, despite Edmonton being, the like festival capital of like all of Canada. It doesn't feel like that, because it feels like those festivals and those events and that culture is sort of concentrated in one area, which is like White Avenue. Can be very vibrant and very colorful and very accepting from like Monday to Thursday, but then from like Friday to Sunday, it's just a drunken, crazy, dangerous street full of young, majority white, drunk people. That's kind of it. I'm just like, I don't know, being in Toronto really made me realize that there's more to having a inclusive and colorful city than just some festivals here and there. It's totally a way of life. It's a way of being, and it's a culture on a provincial side that Alberta clearly has a culture. It really does have a specific way of being if you're an Albertan, and they take pride in it, and there's memes about being Albertans. And that's what I've realized. Not really much changes. You can put a couple of pieces of glitter on something and it's not going to change really what it is.
That's so interesting that you say that, like, the memes about Alberta, because I think that we know them, we recognize them, and then you and I are here as Albertans with a totally different experience of what that identity is.
Yeah, well, it's just like being on the outside looking in and feeling alone, even surrounded by other people. That's how I always felt growing up as an Albertan. And I grew up in one of the biggest schools. I went to high school in one of the biggest schools in Alberta, which is Ross Shepherd, which is the same high school that Wayne Gretzky went to. And it's like known as like a hockey academy, and like really...
there we go.
It's like really a big deal. It's like a really big school. I remember we had like 3,600 kids at our school. And being there and having only like 10 of them self-identify as Indigenous was really telling of like the state of our society, especially in Alberta. It's like I just felt very alone all the time, and I didn't really grow up with the culture of like being a hockey boy and being like a small town farmer kind of boy. Like I grew up on the res, I grew up in foster care. For me, I always just felt like I was in the bleachers watching the game. I was never a part of the game. You know what I mean? And I didn't really even want to be in the bleachers either, because I had no interest in it. But that's really how it feels, and it sucks because I I remember not being like super proud of like Alberta beef and like oil country and like all of these things that Alberta is like so proud of. I experience Alberta in such different ways because I view Alberta based on treaty territories and communities and
Yes.
nations. Whenever I think about Calgary, I don't think about, oh, Calgary, like, you know, like the Peace Bridge and like the this is and that's and the Stampede and like I don't think about that. I think about like, oh, Calgary, that's the like meeting point of like the Sioux people and the Blackfoot, and you know the Treaty 7 territory is home to like Dene people, and like I think that way. And so I think it's just a different culture, really. When you grow up as a queer person, especially as an Indigenous or BIPOC person in these spaces, you really don't
Totally.
you aren't invited into the party usually.
That resonates so much because we grew up in different places, different environments and experiences, but I also come from a really small town environment. I grew up in like the Bonnyville Cold Lake area, and now like as an adult, I recognize that's Treaty 6 territory, and like learning what peoples, what lands, these things that you're speaking about. I think that's a really important way of mapping this place that I call home. Yeah, those things that you're talking about being from the outside and looking in, I think it resonates not just for being queer, but for being a part of a minority.
Yeah, there's just such an overwhelming presence of white supremacy and of pride in that whiteness and in that white privilege, and it's at times can feel suffocating, especially when you're downtown and you see nothing but big, huge, souped up pickup trucks with sometimes they have Confederate flags. I've seen Confederate flags being flown in Edmonton, and you have these people like sticking their heads out the window, yelling and screaming obscenities at you. I've been called so many things on the streets of Edmonton, and realizing that these are all people that kind of come from those smaller areas like Cold Lake and like Bonnyville and, you know, St. Albert and Nisku and Leduc and all of these surrounding areas. They come into the city and they bring that mentality with them, that small town mentality. And also Alberta did a really good job of not teaching, like our curriculum is not where it should be, not teaching all of the diversities that exist and the truth about Canada and Canada's relationship with Indigenous people. There are so many non-Indigenous people, specifically white people, and a lot of these people are farmers, you know, and oil people and people who live in small towns. They just don't have the same education about the land and about the original inhabitants and keepers of the land. And so I'm not surprised that, you know, when they come into Edmonton, a lot of our communities, a lot of our neighborhoods are named in Cree because Cree is like the most spoken Indigenous language in Canada. But in Amiskwaciwâskahikan in particular, in Edmonton, it's unceded, unsurrendered Papa's Chase Cree Nation territory, and that is being honored a little bit in the sense that the Edmonton City Council is trying so hard to name everything in Cree. But it's kind of funny. It's like so ironic because none of these white people who live here care at all to even say it properly. They just give up. That's where the learning stops. That's where the activism stops. It's like, okay, we named this one area Ermineskin. No one's saying it properly, and no one really cares why it's called Ermineskin. And they're annoyed that they can't say it properly. There's like posts on Reddit of people being like, why do we keep naming all of these things like 20 letter words? Like, no one's gonna say this, just call it, you know, like Groat Road and instead of, you know, Wapigwini Nakusu Road. Like, why do we do that? Like, they're so angry about it.
Yeah, and I really, when I hear that frustration, I think sometimes it comes from definitely ignorance and resistance to change. But I also think sometimes people, even like I'm on Blackfoot territory, and when we try to pronounce Blackfoot names or places, sometimes it's not easy if you haven't come from that vocabulary. But even myself, I've really made a conscious effort to listen to my friends and ask for advice on how to pronounce things, because it really doesn't take that much effort on my part.
You know, I heard a thing that was like, if you can say Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and all
Word.
of those things, then you can say Ermineskin or Gasketeo or Amiskwaciwâskahikan. Like, I don't know, for me, if I was living in someone else's land, we'll use the Philippines, for example. You bet your I'm gonna try to learn a little bit of Tagalog, like I'm gonna try my best to be excited and interested in the people whose land it is and where we are. Land has so much connection to people and to culture. It's so spiritual. And so to be in a place and just have zero interest in like wanting to learn about whose land that was, like, Canada's not that old. Canada's like 150 years old. I always tell people, I'm like, we have moccasins in our family older than Canada. Like, it really isn't that old. So who do you think was living in these lands and raised generations and generations and generations of kids in these lands? And that's important. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Like, people just need to, I think there needs to definitely be a lot more education and awareness about these kinds of things. I didn't learn anything about, I mean, living in Alberta my entire life and going through the entire public school system in Alberta, I didn't get to learn really anything about Indigenous people aside from in elementary, we learned about the fur trade.
Yes,
and we learned
that was the same thing for me.
Yeah, but we learned a very yeah, exactly. We learned a very tailored and very specific version of the fur trade, wherein it was taught to us as some beautiful system of networks of trading, and it was like booming and everyone was happy, and there's images in our textbooks of like Native people giving all these furs over with big smiles on their face, and in return they're getting like guns and alcohol and like just awful. And so that's what people think. They're like, we traded and shared land with the Native people. It was amazing. It was, we all sang Kumbaya, and like there have even been posts that have gone viral in Alberta because of some of the like the homework activities that children are getting to bringing home with them. One of them said, it said, we all know about some of the atrocities that happened in the Indian residential schools, but please list 5 good things that happened because of the schools. And that was like one of their activities that they were supposed to do. And this is Indigenous and non-Indigenous kids that have to do this. What is that teaching our young people? Like, you can't make that stuff up. There are teachers that are so personally invested with their own opinions and beliefs about genocide and about like literally ethnic cleansing and assimilation. They feel so strongly about it that they're willing to risk their careers by creating education materials to send with their kids that are apologetic of genocide and are dismissive of the trauma and the horrors that happened in those systems. And so that's just one example, but there's so many of them in the way that Alberta culture is coded to really be proud of colonization and love living in that system.
There's still so much work that needs to be done, and I can imagine that it's an exhausting prospect at times. But I want to tell you, this is something from my own small town that I grew up in that I shared earlier. I have a friend, she is Cree, she's mixed, and she's Two-Spirit as well. She told me that she was working, I think, in a high school with students and wanted to bring a drag performer into the community. And it caused this whole, like, I guess, uproar. We had to have a town hall meeting and say, should we allow this individual into our community to speak with youth? And what she told me was it shocked her that a small town, 5,000 population, 3.5 hours away from Edmonton, so very isolated, they were actually defending why this queen should be allowed to come and work with the youth, how it could be something enriching for the community. And the one person who was really vocal about being against it in the room, apparently she said that even he had a moment where he was like, you know what, thank you for sharing this with me, and now I'm going to think about it a bit differently. So I totally agree that there is so much work to be done, but it is encouraging to see, even in places that you would never expect it. Like, I was not out of the closet 10 years ago at Bonnyville Centralized High School. It just was not a thing. But look at what's happening even in small movement.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, no matter what, queer people will grow like vines where there's no room for them always, and they will be existing in those spaces that don't make room for them. And so it is really heartwarming to know that like these people are still existing and still flourishing, and that even in those areas where they're there really isn't a lot of room. They're trying their best, and there's always going to be people that are putting up that good fight and that good peaceful fight and really standing up for themselves. I hope that that story resonates and that that story continues to grow. I see it in my own nieces and nephews. I'm asking them, like, when
Wow.
they're in grade like 5, 6, I'm like, so are there gay kids? Are there lesbians? Are there like trans kids? And there are. They've told me. My
Isn't that
nieces and nephews
crazy?
are like, yeah, there's a girl in my class and she has a girlfriend. And I'm like, oh, and you guys are like 12? Like, and then she goes, yeah, there's also Billy likes to be called they them. Billy is non-binary. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that never happened when we were young. Like, I didn't even
No.
come out until I went to university. Like,
Hmm.
because there was only in that school of 3,600 people in like central Edmonton, only maybe 2 were openly gay. And
Isn't that insanity to think about?
yeah, and it was like this like 6'2", super queer, like bubbly, eccentric kind of a person with like blue hair who was the president of the Gay and Straight Alliance
Icon.
because he started it. And the only
Hmm.
people that went to the Gay and Straight Alliance were him and his like 4 straight like cis het girlfriends. They were the only ones every day who sat in that club. And it was really sad because I would walk by and I would see them just all laughing in there, and I'm like, if I go in there, I'm basically coming out. Is how I felt about it, and I'm like, I'm not
Hmm.
ready for that. I don't care how safe of a space it is. Once I'm out of that space, it's not going to be safe anymore. So I wish I had. I don't blame myself at all. I wish I had more support around me. I wish that it was safer for people like me and people like him who had the guts and the courage to even start that club because no one had done it before.
Hmm.
It takes people like that. It really does take people like that to make change. And I'm sure if I were to go to Roshep now and see a bunch of people put up their hands, if I asked like who in this room is queer, out of that 3,600 kids, there's probably going to be like at least 10, 15, 20% of those kids are going to be queer. So
Hmm.
things have really definitely changed, and I think now too a lot more of our young people have the language, and even our older people too now these days have the language and the verbiage to be able to describe their identities and describe the way that they feel. Now they're like, wow, there's so many more options that I can be. I don't
Hmm.
have to just be man, woman, gay, lesbian. I don't even like people. I can be asexual. I can not even desire sex or want it. You can go to the buffet and eat kind of anything you want now instead of just the couple of options that were there before.
I am so down for gay buffet.
I
Like,
love gay buffet.
makes me think about how even like when you remember eons ago, it feels like when schools wouldn't let students use their left hand when writing, and they suppressed that for so long. And then all of a sudden, when that was removed, it was like this huge spike in people being like, I'm left handed. And so when there's more exposure, when the rules change, of course, people are going to seemingly come out of the woodworks. And that works the same way with queerness and identity.
Yeah, and now we have queer actors, queer pop stars, we
Mm-hmm.
have queer MPs, we have queer influencers, we have people who are in the media, people who are getting a lot of attention and who are using their voices, who are openly queer, they're openly trans, they're openly non-binary, and that representation is lifting, that tide is lifting so many of the ships of our young people who would never have even uttered those words or taken that identity on for themselves if they didn't see somebody being successful and being
Mm-hmm.
happy who also identifies
Mm-hmm.
that way.
I immediately have to tell you that I also acknowledge you as doing a lot of that work too, like with your presence on social media, with your outreach, especially with your passion for working with youth in particular. Like you are definitely, I think, filling that role for a lot of people. And it even reminds me of one of the first TikTok videos of yours that I ever saw. I don't remember all the details, but it was the Mean Girls one. And you say that somebody has like the biggest something in all of Treaty 6. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, yeah. She's the most cooked girl in all of Treaty 6. That was me. I was talking about myself because I was in a wig. But I was playing
Yeah.
I was playing the Karen Smith character. But I was being
Yes.
Kairyn Smith. Yeah, that's just something funny that we say as like Native people in Treaty 6. We always call each other cooked when we mean like wow, you're really airhead, spacey, like what people I guess would call blonde. Like, you're so blonde. Like, that stereotype of just being like a kind of a ditz. Like, she's cooked. Like, she's so cooked. And so I always make jokes about that. The most cooked girl in
Oh my
all
God.
of Treaty 6.
Like, I'm getting all of the background, so thank you. Now I can actually understand what's going on in these videos.
I love doing
But
that.
that was, like,
We have to have our own like slangs and our own just ways that we talk to each other, our colloquialisms, our little like expressions. And then I think really like that comedy and that laughter is such a vehicle for education, because I have so many people who are just like you who come up to me and they're like, hey, I really love that video, but what does this mean?
right? I'm like, can I get invited to the club to know what it means?
Yeah. And I'm like, it means this. And they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. I would have never thought that.
And, you know, that makes me think again of language, because I was prepping for this interview and I watched, you gave such a beautiful talk. It was at, I think, the Trans Plus, is that right? Summit?
Yeah, the Trans Plus Summit.
Yes, I was watching it and I was really like listening to you when you were speaking about, again, two-spirit identity and language, and how one day you said you would like to introduce yourself to people and say that you are Winkte. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, of course.
I would really love if this podcast could be an opportunity for you to continue to share what that term is and where it comes from and what it means to you, so more people can understand it.
Totally. I learned about that term 3-ish years ago in my two-spirit journey. And so my community is from the Paul First Nation and also from the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. And the language that we speak there is called Ithka or Ithkabi. And it's Stony. It's called Stony, or it's an Assiniboine language. And the reason I say Assiniboine is because Asini mean in like the Algonquin rooted word, Asini means stone or rock. And so many of our people were just called stony people because we come from the mountains, and also we use hot rocks to cook our food. And so that's kind of how we got that name of being stony in English. But in our own language, we call it Ithka or Ithka. We speak this dialect. It's a Siouxian language. It's a part of the Siouxian language family, Nakota, Lakota, Dakota. And many of the words that we use in our Nakota language, or Ithka, is different than down south in Lakota languages and Dakota. Many are the same, but it's obviously a different dialect. It's a different language. And so I was looking through all of the different terms and all of the phrases that they use to describe queerness. And one of them that continuously came up was this idea of Winkte. And I looked into it a little bit more, and it comes from the root word wia. And wia is a word that we use in our language too, to mean woman. And so, for example, my niece, who's 22, I was there when she was born, and my grandma named her Wia Washte. And Washte in our language means, and sometimes we say Washteno, but Washte means like something is really good, something feels really nice, it's really beautiful. So Wia is just like a girl or a woman. And so they called her Wia Washte, which means like pretty girl or like beautiful girl. And so learning about this term Wiankte or Winkte, it really kind of loosely translates to somebody that moves through the world kind of like a woman would move through the world. And English obviously butchers the translation and doesn't really encapsulate that spirit of that word. But looking more into that word, I realized that in many of our Sioux cultures, Winkte people were quite revered and had very specific and powerful roles in the community of being people that kept folks together and were a lot of the times used as mediators or counselors because they had these different perspectives. And you're going to notice that if you do some research into Two-Spirit, in many different nations, that same theme of two-eyed seeing and of different perspectives and shifting, the status quo and giving people insights that they wouldn't have normally have because we have perspectives that are different and we grow up in a different place in society. So we have different vantage points of seeing things, and we harness that masculine and feminine energy. And I've definitely noticed that that's true in my world and in my life. And I was told that I was two-spirit by my elders a long time ago, when I was 4 years old, before I even was gay, before I even was like liking anybody. It wasn't about whether I was gay or not. It was about me being a two-spirit person, because they knew that I was. They felt that I was, and what I was doing in my family. I was walking around in heels and a dress and, pretending my mom's hair was my hair. And they would see these things and they would say, oh, Kai is moving through the world kind of like a woman would. And it's very obvious that even though he's 4 years old, this is who his spirit is. This is who his path is. And so they would just constantly call me two-spirit. And then I really craved a word that wasn't English. It wasn't a colonized English term like two-spirit, to be able to really connect back with who I was as a person. And Winkte is one of those words that really gives me a lot of pride, and really, I definitely need to look more into it and start to really, really do some research into it. But for now, it's one of those words that really makes me feel proud and makes me feel like, you know what, that word has been around for time immemorial, since before the English language. And so it just comes with it so much more power than saying I'm two-spirit. I still say I'm two-spirit, but like I said, like at the beginning of your question, it would be nice if I could just say, hi, I'm a Winkte person, or, I identify as Winkte, because that word alone would be able to explain who I am better than two-spirit.
When you're describing the way the elders and the people in your life recognize this quality of your personhood as a beautiful thing, it just sounds like it was a really nurturing and supportive environment for this quality, that it was recognized as perhaps a gift.
Absolutely. I don't think at no point in my life has anyone ever called me two-spirit as a bad thing, or has being two-spirit ever been made to me to feel like a negative thing. If anything, I was the one who thought that it was negative, because when I was young and my mom or my auntie would say, leave him alone, he's two-spirit, whenever I would get picked on, I would always feel angry about it, because two-spirit to me felt different, and I didn't want to be different. And so I was really the only person, because of my own perceived, internal homophobia, or just fear of being different. I didn't want to be different. And so I think that that's the only negative thing that really came out of two-spirit identity. But as I got older, and I was like 17, 18, I really started to lean into that idea of being two-spirit. It was just nothing but love, and it was nothing but just learning and blossoming. That's a really good word. Just blossoming into who I was. And I'm still on that journey, figuring that out right now still. But 15 years later, I've discovered a lot, and I'm really in a place now where I have a lot of spiritual fortitude and a lot of protection and a lot of armor on now, and I really do truly love who I am, and I love that our nations, and I say like our nations to mean like both Estonia and Cree, where I grew up, have these really beautiful and really old explanations and teachings about queerness. And maybe it wasn't called queerness, but it was called Ayakwe or Ikwe or Ikwekansu or Winkte. And listening to the old people talk in the language and tell us, like, we call the two-spirit Ikwekansu, because he's the one who has both the masculine and the feminine. And like them just explaining these things, I'm like, oh, so it has existed for a very long time. And listening to even elders who are not two-spirit talk about two-spirit identity is really interesting too, because they tell me, like, yeah, we've always had these people in our communities. They were interesting, important people. And some nations think that two-spirit people really aren't revered. They're just like everybody else, which is awesome, because if that's true, then that's a step up than how society is treating them right now. At least they're all on the same playing field, and they're seen as just another people, because that's truly, at the bare minimum, all I would want is just for two-spirit people to be held in the same respect, in the same regard, in society and then also in ceremony, and have their place in community and not be ridiculed and exiled and have people whispering about them or attacking them or making them feel like less than.
I honestly got chills a little bit when you were naming all of these like ancient names for these experiences that are so much older than colonialism. And something that, just as a baseline, I wanted to tell you in my time with you today is that when I talk with you, I feel like you're on a journey that is a few steps ahead of where I would like to be myself. And what I mean by that is my history and my ancestors also experienced their own time with colonialism. And it's one thing to be mixed and growing up in the diaspora to figure out who you are, but then to also feel a little lonely in your queerness and thinking before all of this. So when I hear you doing this research and connecting to culture, I want you to know it truly inspires me, and I don't think that I'm the only person that feels this way, Kai, because that's so that journey of decolonization, that's something that I'm going on for myself, and seeing you with this knowledge, it just really inspires me.
That's so sweet. I really appreciate that. And I remember I was at an event, and there was somebody there who was a Filipino person, and they were queer, and they gave me this, they told me about this term. I think it was at the Trans Plus Summit. They were a speaker who spoke 2 slots before me, and I saw the topic or the title of their keynote, and it was like Filipino X queer identity or something like that. And I was like, I gotta watch this. Wow. So I snuck in and I watched it, and that person who was speaking had this word in Tagalog, and I want to say it started with a B, but they identified that way. And I can't remember what the word was, but they said that like it was this word that they had in their own language to describe people like them, and that identity came with it, teachings about spirituality and about harnessing spirit and about it was just such a beautiful term, and it made me realize like the same way that like many Indigenous people around the entire world, like even people who are Hawaiian or people who are Polynesian, who are Maori, like the Maori people in their language have a term like, but that's what they call their Two-Spirit people. And it's such a beautiful, I looked into it a little bit. It's such a beautiful explanation of their people. And then there's the Mahu people in Hawaii who traditionally take up both roles of, man and woman within the community. Listening to all of these different explanations of queerness in their own languages was really inspiring and really like, reinforced the idea that like colonization has really hurt and really damaged and has really waged war on queerness and acceptance and self-love and expression for so long, that so many of us, it's kind of sad in a way that like hearing those terms and hearing those words is like shocking and exciting and such a big deal when it really shouldn't be. It should just be like, those people should never have had to go underground or into hiding or be killed or be assimilated. But yeah, just hearing that term at that summit was like such a big moment. I remember like wanting to be like, I'm putting that word in my little suitcase, and I'm gonna carry it around. And if I see like other Filipino people, I'm gonna like ask them about it because it's like such a big, thing. So that's why I'm bringing it up now.
But I think the word that you heard was babaylan. I think that's probably what it was. To what I remember, it's an individual in the community that had a lot of prestige and power and influence because they had those characteristics of like queerness in the sense of maybe gender fluidity, spirituality, kind of similar like that.
And it's different than bakla.
Bakla is gay in Tagalog, yeah.
I knew that they were different things, and I was like, I don't want to screw this up, because I've had people call me bakla. I've had lots of Filipino friends call me bakla, and
probably like, hey bakla.
Yeah, like it never was like venomous or anything. It was just like, what's up,
that
bakla?
means they kiki with you.
Yeah. And I'm like, hi. I'm like, is that my nickname? They're like, it's everyone's
Today
nickname. And I'm like, oh. They're like, that's just what we call each other. And I'm like,
that's so
good.
funny. You're one of us.
Yeah, I learned so many random Tagalog words from my Filipino friends because they speak Even when they're speaking to me and I don't speak Tagalog at all, they speak half Tagalog and half English to me. And I'm
Taglish, yeah.
yeah, they'll be like speaking and then at the end they'll add like po all the time, or they'll be like kuya or like pogi, or like they'll just throw in random Tagalog words and I'm like, listen, I understood 90% of that sentence, but I don't know what that word is. And then they have to translate it to me. But then next time they say it, I know what it means.
But you know what? If you're getting bakla and po and pogi, those are all good ones. So you
Oh,
know
good.
you're with good company.
Good.
Yeah. Pogi. You know what pogi means, right?
It's like handsome, right?
You got it.
Yeah, like guapo.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I speak Spanish, so it really helps me in learning Tagalog. I'm not learning Tagalog, but it helps me to understand
I
a little
think
bit
you
of
are.
Tagalog. Maybe a little bit, maybe indirectly, at a very
Just a
slow
little
pace.
bit.
I am learning a little bit of Tagalog. I know. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like I
think,
don't truly know what that
G-rating.
means. Maybe we.
You gotta really enunciate it, like that.
I remember not truly knowing what that meant and people having the same reaction that you're having. And I'm like, oh, did I say something bad? Like, what's going on? Like, you guys all say it.
No,
I'm
you
going to
just
say
said
it
you were
too.
handsome.
Yeah, something like that.
Kuya Kaya in the house today.
Kuya, auntie?
Kuya is like big brother. Auntie would be tita.
Tita, sorry.
Tita, tito for
Tito,
uncle.
yeah.
But yeah, babaylan would be the term that we originally got started on, I'm pretty sure. But someone is, if I'm mispronouncing it myself, my titas will let me know, or someone in the comments can let me know, and we'll get it fixed.
Yes, thank you. Salamat po.
You're welcome. Oh my god, we're gonna have to go and get some Filipino food when I visit you or something.
I just looked up the term babaylan, and in Filipino culture it refers to a traditional healer or shaman in the pre-colonial Philippines, particularly among the Visayan people. Babaylans were highly respected as spiritual leaders, healers, and mediators between the physical world and the spiritual realm. They played significant roles in their community, often involved in rituals, healing practices, providing wisdom and guidance. Even though they were historically they were women, there were also cases where the role was taken up by men, especially those who assumed female gender roles, and that this aspect has led contemporary interpretations to see Babaylan as a figure of encompassing a range of gender expressions and identities, including those that align with people that are queer.
I love that we did this together, and I loved that crisp crunchy of the keyboard. It was very good.
I was just like, let me really quickly, because I'm so interested in that kind of stuff. And with the way that I learn, I'm like, I have something in my head. I need to itch this scratch right immediately. Now. And now we have, and now we know what babaylan means. So
I had a conversation with an elder here in the community, and he told me that my culture isn't gone. It's still out there, and I just have to go and connect and find it. And I just think the fact that we were able to do a little bit of that right now, slay.
So slay. And also, I like using the word with young people. I don't talk about dying languages and extinction. I talk about our languages are sleepy. Our culture's a little bit sleepy, but we're going to wake it up. Don't worry. Like, what we're doing right now is we're waking up our culture, we're waking up our language, getting ourselves used to saying it again and being in it. And it's going to come naturally because blood memory is a thing.
And with you mentioning young people, as we're kind of getting closer towards the end of our time together, I know you have that love for the youth and working with them. Is there anything you maybe would want to say to those of the listeners who are youth here in Alberta, who are maybe looking for representation from someone like you who's had a similar experience?
Yeah, one of the things that I wish that I did more as a kid was play and be a kid. And, you know, growing up in Alberta, growing up in foster care, and growing up in a colonial system wherein my mom was in the residential schools, all of my aunties are in the residential schools, facing that colonial violence and that assimilation meant that I had to grow up really fast. And the legacy of trauma that that genocide has left in our family is one of addiction, debt, poverty, poor living conditions, disconnection from culture and language. And any young person who's listening, I just always want to remind you that true reconciliation will only happen when we have just immense Indigenous joy. And I want our young people to focus on being young and having fun and find things in your life that make you smile, that make you excited, that make you want to wake up in the morning and look forward to it, and then replicate those things every single day and do whatever you can to keep laughing and to keep having fun and to keep smiling, because that is that is resistance. Indigenous joy is resistance. And if you want to get to a place where I am, just keep loving yourself and keep reaching out to people. I am not self-made, I am community-made, and I was blessed to have a great support system around me. And so I say, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. We are community people as Indigenous people, and first and foremost, your peers and your family and your support system and your chosen family will keep your spirit strong. So continue to do that, and yeah, try to have fun in the meantime a little bit. Life is gonna hit you really fast. You're gonna end up like me. You're gonna end up 30 and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm not a kid anymore. But boy, do I ever sometimes wish I could be a kid again, just for a little bit, and like go back and not focus so much on survival and focus on being a child a little bit and not worrying about things that were sort of out of my control. I wish I could have done that. So that's my piece of advice to the youth.
I think that's pretty good advice. I think that the youth are so excited, just as I am, to have you on the show today. Is there anything that you were wanting to say in the space before we head out?
I would love to say hi Ninaskumon. That's Cree, thank you, I'm very grateful. And then also Ishnish Pinamad, which is my other language, Stony, and that just means thank you, I'm grateful. You can find me on all social media, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, everything. Oh, Kairyn. And then one project that I have currently on the go is I founded an Indigenous gaming organization called Nichi Clan, which is a Discord online server that brings together Indigenous youth who want to play video games and who want to just be in a space and have squat up with some Nichis and have a great time talking about your day and just making friends and giving each other resources on how to do things like content creation and live streaming video games and all of that good stuff. And it's totally free to join. And we have some tournaments coming up and we give away prizes all the time. It's just a really great, wholesome community to be a part of. You can go to Nichi Clan, NEECHI Clan, CLAN.com. And it takes like 1 minute to sign up and join. So I hope to see you all there.
Haley is working on that with you, isn't
Yes,
she?
Haley is a very proud member of Nichi Clan. So if you want to talk to Haley too,
Love
you can
that.
come hang out in Nichi Clan.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to another episode of Queer in Alberta, and a phenomenal huge thank you to Kai. Maybe you were able to think about things a little bit differently, hearing his story and his perspective. Kai is, of course, busy as always. I think I just saw some footage of them at the Toronto International Film Festival at TIFF, chatting with celebrities on the red carpet, so do be sure to go and follow Kai on his social media. Now we are going to go on a bit of a break. We've been releasing content all summer long, and we are going to go right into filming season 3, as well as those extra episodes with the support of our besties from Stringham LLP. Go follow at kels.valendella on Instagram and TikTok to stay in the loop on what's going on with those episodes. You're definitely not going to want to miss out. No matter where you are listening from in the world, my friends, I hope you are feeling celebrated, seen, and loved for the beautiful person that you are. I cannot wait to come back and give you updates galore, and I can't wait to see what these episodes in person are going to look like. So let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, that's it for me. Bye.